Good morning, Year 4, and welcome to Tuesday's English lesson for week 2. Today we're going to carry on with George's Marvellous Medicine, and we're going to learn particularly about something called onomatopoeia. Now that's a really hard word to say. Why don't you try it? Onomatopoeia. So what does it mean? Onomatopoeia is a word that sounds like the noise it's describing. So I've put some examples on the screen for you. We have pop, we have bang, click, cuckoo, splash, and whoosh. And I'm sure you can think of lots of other words, but those words sound like the noise that they're describing. Pause the video and see if you can think of any more. Right, let's find out what happens in today's chapter. This chapter is called The Cook-Up. In the kitchen, George put the saucepan on the stove and turned up the gas flame underneath it as high as it would go. "George," came the awful voice from the next room. "It's time for my medicine." "Not yet, Grandma," George called back. "There's still 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. "What mischief are you up to in there now?" Granny screeched. "I hear noises." George thought it best not to answer this one. He found a long wooden spoon in a kitchen drawer and began stirring hard. The stuff in the pot got hotter and hotter. Soon the marvellous mixture began to froth and foam. A rich blue smoke, the colour of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid, and a fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. It made George choke and splutter. It was a smell unlike any he had smelled before. It was a brutal and bewitching smell, spicy and staggering, fierce and frenzied, full of wizardry and magic. Whenever he got a whiff of it up his nose, firecrackers went off in his skull and electric prickles ran along the backs of his legs. It was wonderful to stand there stirring this amazing mixture and to watch it smoking blue and bubbling and frothing and foaming as though it were alive. At one point, he could have sworn he saw bright sparks flashing in the swirling foam. And suddenly, George found himself dancing around the steaming pot, chanting strange words that came into his head out of nowhere. "Fiery broth and witch's brew, foamy froth and riches blue, fume and spume and spoondrift spray, fizzle, swizzle, shout hooray! Watch it sloshing, swashing, sploshing, hear it hissing, squishing, spissing, Grandma better start to pray." I wonder if you heard a lot of onomatopoeia in that chapter. There were lots of words that Roald Dahl used to describe the sounds that the potion was making. Pause the video to see how many onomatopoeia words you can find in this section of the chapter. Let's have a look at what I found. So I found the words fizzle, swizzle, sloshing, swashing, sploshing. Great words. You can imagine exactly how it sounds. Roald Dahl has made up some of his own words in this section, and that's okay because it helps us to understand how the potion is sounding and what it's doing. This section of the chapter is really interesting because Roald Dahl uses a lot of description to tell us what's going on. So again, I found some more onomatopoeia which I've highlighted here. We've got choke and splutter. We've got whiff, which is like a sniff. And we've got frothing. But there's also a lot of other description in there, similar to what we've been looking at already this term. There are lots of adjectives to help us. So we've got rich blue smoke, fiery fearsome smell, and I don't know if you've spotted, but that's alliteration. We were looking at that last week. And there's a lot more alliteration in here as well. We have brutal and bewitching smell, spicy and staggering, that's alliteration, fierce and frenzied. It's everywhere, and he uses it to have an impact on the reader, to tell them about this potion and make it sound much more interesting. He also uses the senses. And what I've done here is use the same part of the chapter, but I've underlined different bits. See if you can tell which sense matches each colour I've used. Pause the video to have a look. The parts that are underlined in red are things that George is seeing. A rich blue smoke, the colour of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid. And then at the bottom, to watch it smoking blue and bubbling and frothing and foaming as though it were alive. At one point, he could have sworn he saw bright sparks flashing in the swirling foam. So those are all things that he can see. The green underlining is things that he can smell, and Roald Dahl has really focused on his sense of smell in this part of the chapter. A fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. It was a smell unlike any he had smelled before, brutal and bewitching, spicy and staggering, all these descriptive words just to describe one sense. And then the blue is for things that he can feel in his body, so his sense of touch. Firecrackers went off in his skull and electric prickles ran along the backs of his legs. So Roald Dahl has used 3 different senses to describe this potion. What we'd like you to do today is to try and do the same sort of thing. You're going to use your senses and some onomatopoeia, and possibly some alliteration if you're really clever, to imagine what your potion would be like. You're going to write a paragraph describing it for us. Think particularly about what it would look, sound, and smell like. You can do this on paper, of course, or if you go into Google Classroom, you'll find a Google Doc ready for you to use that looks like this. So it's got your Can I title at the top, a reminder of onomatopoeia, and then your instructions. So it says underneath, write a paragraph to describe what you imagine your potion would look, sound, and smell like. Think carefully about the vocabulary you choose. I've done a sentence of my own, just to start you off, and I've written, the thick blue liquid in the pan bubbled and popped, releasing wisps of swirling smoke. So just in that one sentence, I've used some adjectives and split them with a comma because it's an adjective list. I've used onomatopoeia in the word popped, and I've also used alliteration for swirling smoke. And that is focusing on my sense of sight. So that's focusing on what I can see. I would then go on to think about how it would smell and how it would sound as well. I can't wait to read all the fantastic words that you use to describe your potions. Have fun writing, and I'll see you tomorrow.